Hello and welcome to the North Bank podcast with me, producer Chris, and Stef. No Holly today, he's otherwise engaged, so we're going to sort of rip through this without him. How are you, Stef?
I'm good, thanks. Yep, looking forward to the return of real football on Saturday.
Yes, because of course we've just come out of the last of this year's international breaks. I think notable is the fact that we had players playing and players not playing. What's your sort of your general kind of view on the international break as it was?
Well, I'm glad that that's the last one until March, I think the next one is, which is absolutely delightful. Yeah, I mean, to have Saka and Rice both not feature for England, albeit because of injury, is just delightful. Few of the players were nicely ticking over. Havertz, I think, picked up another goal during the break. Saliba got some plaudits for his performance against Italy. So did Raya, playing for Spain. The only sort of negative coming out of it is Trossard apparently limped off for Belgium. And reports today that we are looking to offer him a new contract as well.
Indeed.
Which is something.
I think also we've got to probably touch on the response from some fans, and I say fans in inverted commas, to Trossard's injury. I know we are generally a fickle bunch, us fans, and even our Holly, who's referred to Trossard as Drossard until he scores, and then he'll be the best thing since sliced bread again. But there were some people saying that they were glad that he was injured, and I just can't get my head around that. Support your team, support the players. If they're going through a bad patch, you probably need to lift them even more. I can't abide that mentality. But yeah, hopefully it is just a knock rather than a muscular thing. Do we know any more about that?
No updates. I think Arteta's press conference. Well, exactly. And Arteta's press conference is tomorrow, and we'll probably get riddles and cryptic crossword clues as to what on earth is happening with certain players, which has made picking a team for this weekend quite tricky. But just to give my 2 pence on the Trossard contract extension is, I think it's interesting to look at the other players in the squad, because Sterling's here for a season from Chelsea, so presumably he's going to go back. There's no way we're going to eat up his wages and any potential fee, given that we're not really using him a huge amount anyway. And then perhaps ahead of Trossard, if we were thinking about players that may need to move on, got to say Gabriel Jesus is probably slightly ahead in that fashion. He's on much bigger, therefore restrictive wages, and frankly hasn't contributed an awful lot, whereas Trossard has. Yeah, sticky spell in the last few weeks, but being asked to do things that he's not been asked to do before, and ultimately I think is a victim of being compared to Martin Odegaard, and he's just not the same player, and certainly not the same level. I think Trossard can still offer plenty to the team. In what role and what capacity, don't know. The fact that he came off the bench against Chelsea and looked okay, looked good, I think, will, and on that left-hand side, might settle him a little bit more. I think bigger picture, I don't really see a problem with that.
No, and it's that recency bias thing again, isn't it? It had these few weeks of indifferent form not happened. I don't think anyone would have any problem with him signing an extension. I would say he's a useful squad member,
And conversely, I mean, up north, Man City have just given a contract extension to a manager who's lost 4 on the bounce. So it's a different world we live in now, isn't it?
All right, so we got through the internationals relatively unscathed. I think taking a step back and looking at where we are at and going into this next run of games, which are sort of supposedly easier fixtures, what's your kind of view on where we're at and projecting forward to these next, say, 7 games?
Well, the first thing is, just psychologically, I'm hating everyone referring to these fixtures coming up as winnable and easy and blah, blah, blah. And, granted, on paper, sure, they're teams that are in the lower half of the league and therefore are unlikely to be in brilliant, consistent form compared to the teams we have been playing at the top. But at the same time, there's no gimmies really in this league. Maybe Southampton aside, and Wolves, because they're just not picking up the wins. But we've got to kick on. I think for that, the bigger picture of the season and where it goes, we're looking for a run of a number of wins. But the first one coming up against Forest this weekend is by far and away the hardest, because of all those teams. They are sort of, well, I was going to say they're banging form, but obviously their last game before the international break, they lost to Newcastle, and Newcastle actually were very impressive that day, I thought. Almost more so than when they beat us. Watching the Newcastle game when we lost to them, I felt that was much more down to our poor performance. I think Newcastle, took their chance that they got. It was a very well delivered cross and blah, blah, blah. But actually, we were just so abject. Whereas at Forest, they really got at them and tried to shut down Forest's quick attacks and breaks. So that kind of helped. So it's going to be the biggest test for us. But if we come through it, in a positive way, then that should give us a huge amount of confidence then going forward. And with the players coming back from injury, things could absolutely pick up. And we won't talk about what happens if that doesn't happen.
But just pick up on what you said about players coming back from injury, kind of looking back at the first, say, quarter of the season. We have suffered. We've suffered from obviously injuries, which Holly would say is partly down to us for overplaying people, I would imagine. But things out of our control as well, like the ridiculous sending offs, the suspensions we've had to endure. This is the point at which hopefully things do come back together, and that's kind of what I'm looking at is consistency going forward, trying to find a settled back four. I know it's difficult with Ben White out, but Timber is a very able deputy at right back. Calafiori may or may not come back in this weekend. The midfield, we haven't yet seen the kind of preferred three in the middle that we imagine Arteta is thinking of, as in Merino left eight, Rice holding and Ødegaard. So for me, it's going to be a case of let's see how it works once we field that kind of best 11.
And similarly, there are other teams that, everyone's talking about Man City's injuries, important players that are lost, and look at their form, to have lost 4 on the bounce, first time in Pep's career, first time for Man City, obviously, in a long time. So those things, they will affect a team. And like you say, it's hard to really put it in a hugely positive light, knowing that we're, 9 points off Liverpool at the top. But on the flip side, Liverpool are in unprecedented sort of run of form. I nearly said Klopp then. Slot has made the best start, for a new manager, I think, in Premier League history. So, we're talking about two very conflicting things, and I do think, like you, that things will even out ever so slightly over the next few weeks, and that requires us to make that uplift. You say about what Holly thinks. Holly, we obviously messaged him and asked if he could give us his team and his score, but he also sent a follow-up message looking ahead at these games and said, I say we have to win all of our next 7 league games up to the end of the year. No room for slippage. Do that and we'll be back in it.
Oh, well, okay. Easily done.
Easy.
I think also what feeds into that is where we've looked to the squad is that, and I've said this before about them not being informed, the people that you would like to look at, like Jesus, like Sterling, just haven't been at the races. And City obviously have a squad that I guess they rotate better than us, let's face it. They keep their players on their toes. If they've got Grealish, they can swap him for Doku and there's no drop off. Whereas we've suffered, it seems, from just poor form in that respect. We just haven't been able to replace. I know Ødegaard was a big miss and there is no like for like, but I feel like there are things you can't legislate for, and I feel like a bit of luck, bit of form. There's that thing as well of, do you play a player back into form or do you drop him in order to give him a kick up the arse to restore some form? Yeah. And all those soft factors come into it as well that we just don't know how things are going to play out.
And to go on the flip side of that, we know that there are things we can improve on. Like you say, the rotation could be better, in some of those, again, inverted commas, lesser games. You look at the Leicester game or the Southampton game when actually there were some players that could have got minutes there as well. And then, just the discipline of the players. It's interesting. I saw a stat because obviously everyone's talking about referees, and we've had the whole David Coote situation sort of unravel in front of everyone. That's only fueled various sort of perceptions of referees. Well, we've got Simon Hooper this weekend, and in 13 games, or his last 13 games, I think it was, refereeing the Arsenal, he's not issued one red card. So fingers crossed, we get an even contest at the weekend. So, but it's one of those things, isn't it? All we're looking for is consistency. And again, something that came up tonight. These are just rumours. Obviously, there was talk about the automated offside or semi-automated offside coming in. Supposed to come in at the start of the season, but got delayed. Has been delayed again, and now apparently it might be pushed back to the start of next season. So. I just don't know what the authorities that run football are really doing. I mean, it probably doesn't help that you've got these different vested interests. We've just had the UEFA Nations League. FIFA are banging on about this Club World Cup that looks absolutely appalling at the end of the year in the summer. And they're all vying and competing with each other. And there needs to be one sort of direction that people are pulling in, and it just doesn't seem to be. The fact that they've got automated offside, semi-automated offside in Europe, and we don't, just is baffling. The fact that the Greek league, for big games, for big derbies, will use foreign referees, and we don't even entertain the idea, again, is a bit of a nonsense and makes us look like we're slightly antiquated in the way that we approach these things. And that's what's disappointing, I think. You forget all your conspiracies about the Northwest Mafia and all that kind of stuff. I think it's just a way of trying to be professional and trying to hold everyone to certain standards and doing so in the right way. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting sort of run up to Christmas now.
Yeah. Well, let's not open that referee box. Okay, I think what we'll do now is we'll take a look at the game coming up on Saturday. As Holly would say, look ahead to rather than look forward to, given our current kind of wavering form. What have you got on Forest, Steph?
Only a couple of things, if I'm honest. I mean, I'll give you something to think about. I knew Holly wouldn't be able to make it, so I did look up the number of players that have played for both Forest and Arsenal in the Premier League era. There are 13. I would have probably got 3 if I was doing it blind. So, I mean, I'll leave that and I'll go through the list at the end and it might spark a few memories.
Okay.
But yeah, there's 13 Forest and Arsenal since 92, 93 season. Have a think on that. Otherwise, only a couple of things that came up. I mean, when I said about Forest being in form, they're unbeaten away so far in the Premier League. And one of their away wins was away at Anfield against Liverpool, who are, easily top of the Premier League. So they are, not to be taken lightly. It's not the Forest that we played, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, that we kind of beat 5-0, I think it was. They've come on in leaps and bounds. They play in a specific style. It's that Nuno Espirito Santo style where they look to contain and then hit on the counter. They've got some devastating wingers, Callum Hudson-Odoi, and Aina, is it? I think the fullback has been having a great season, and especially Chris Woods up top. I mean, he's like, someone described him as the pound shop Haaland, but actually, put it this way, if Arsenal had a choice between the two, on personality alone, I'm going Chris Woods all day. But yeah, I think it's 12 goals in 9 matches It's just he's what a purple patch. So we've definitely got to look to try and put the shackles on him a little bit. And the only other significant thing I sort of picked out, and this says probably more about us, is the last time we played them was in January. And what was significant about that game? Do you remember anything?
Well, it kicked off our run of form, didn't it?
Well, that was partly it, bigger context. But something happened in that game that hasn't happened since.
You're going to have to help me there.
Well, Gabriel Jesus scored a Premier League goal.
God.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, wow. January.
Yeah, it's not great reading that, is it? But there we go. Yeah, it's going to be a humdinger of a game. I think it's going to be exciting. I hope the atmosphere suits it. I know it's going to be cold with the snap that we've got going, but first game back, 3:00. I think everyone needs to bring their dinner, as Red Action say on Twitter.
Yeah. So why don't you read out Holly's team predicted lineup?
Holly's team. Well, he has caveated it, obviously, with Arteta's mysteries and revealed for injuries, saying that obviously his team would change, but he's assuming that particularly Saka and Rice are fit. Raya in goal, back four, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori. And then he's gone for a midfield three of Partey, Rice and Odegaard. So I'm assuming Partey's the sitter, Rice as the left 8, Odegaard as the right 8. And then your front three, Saka, Havertz, Martinelli.
Okay. Do you want to give us yours?
I've been a bit sort of twitchy on the injuries. Not so much, but I think actually it's in defence more than anything. I think Rice and Saka have definitely been held back. The fact that they featured against Chelsea when those injuries were kind of there, and Saka is hopefully just a knock. Raya in goal, but I've gone for a back four of Partey, Saliba, Gabriel, Timber. I've heard nothing about the state of Calafiori, and even if he is back and able to be involved, is he able to start and hit the ground running? I don't know. Midfield three, therefore, of Rice at the base of midfield with Odegaard and Merino, and then a front three, same, Saka, Havertz, Martinelli. So I think injuries are going to play a huge factor. What about you?
Yeah, well, I'm keen to keep Timber at right back, and I look at our left back options. So similar to you, Raya in goal. I want Timber at right back, Saliba, Gabriel, and then Calafiori ? Obviously, there's the caveat there with his injury, but like I said, I don't want to move Timber, so I'd go Zinni.
Right.
If I know there's been a lot of photos doing the rounds of Tierney on the training ground, bombing up and down with his Tesco bag.
Is it a coincidence that we had our first snow this week? And then the short-sleeved Scott at left back returns. It's almost like maybe, I don't know, maybe that's his, what's the opposite of kryptonite? Like snow is his healing property that brings him back to life.
He rubs it over his hammies.
The restorative power of snow to a Scotsman. And then Kieran Tierney's back on the training pitch. I mean, I love Tierney. But
he's probably lying in Colney, wearing nothing but a posing pouch, doing that with, those snow angels that people do. Oh, yes.
Wim Hof, the ice bucket guy next to him, cheering him on.
But there have been people seriously saying, well, maybe Tierney could come back in. And as much as, we romanticise about Tierney, and I really don't see it. I can't see any way back for him, really, generally. I think it's just keeping him fit ahead of a January sale. So anyway, Zinni is my sort of backup to Calafiori there. And then I'm going to go, assuming Rice is fit, I want to see that three in midfield of Merino, Rice and Odegaard. And the same up front, Martinelli, Havertz, Saka.
Yeah, so the front line kind of sorts itself out, doesn't it?
It does. Although, there was part of me thinking, does Martinelli need a little breather? He'll be coming back from Brazil with Gabby, and maybe he could be an impact sub. But then I think, as we said earlier about the form, who's in form that could replace him?
Yeah, it's not Trossard. It's not Jesus, it's not Sterling, is it?
No.
I think you play it, then you've got to think tactically. You play with him with his pace, and you probably say to him, right, I want an hour at 100 miles an hour, and then we'll bring you off. Like, almost plan the sub to just try and pin their fullbacks back, because that's where the danger lies in terms of Forest's counter. Then, when he softened up, you look at the bench and think about, what can Trossard do? Maybe Gabby Jesus from that point onwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the score predictions then. I know Holly's going to come up with something outrageous.
Do you want to know what he got? I don't know how outrageous you'll think this is, but he's gone for an Arsenal win 4-1.
Okay.
Forest have conceded fewer goals than us this season, so that's interesting.
Okay.
4-1.
Well, maybe he sees this as the catalyst as it was earlier this year, to our form. And I hope he's right, obviously, but I don't see it happening. What's yours?
Well,
don't.
I'm slightly the other way. And I think it's interesting that, like you say, at times, we both drew before the international break. No, we drew before the international break and Forest lost. But our draw felt like really quite a positive draw, I suppose, in all things kind of considered. So both teams could get late in the game and be quite happy if things aren't overly kind of stretched one way. Look,
I've see where this is going.
Yeah, I know. I've gone 1-1.
Okay.
1-1.
And I've gone with the same. I'm going 2-1. I'm going with a narrow victory. To us. To us.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. But I do think you were saying earlier about there's no gimmies, and you're right. But I do think if we are going to be title challengers this year, there does need to be an upturn in form sooner rather than later. And this is where I think it needs to happen. I'm not saying it will. I just think we do need to start turning it on now, and hopefully players coming back from injury, form, however it resurrects itself.
Yeah. And look, if I'm putting my real positive hat on, Odegaard's comeback cannot be understated in terms of what he's going to offer us creatively. And similarly, having the options of the likes of Partey and Rice, Marino, if he can be that dual monster that, we're hoping he can be, well, that could offer us the protection against the threats that Forest could bring. Gabby and Saliba, you probably wouldn't want another centre-back pairing up against an informed striker in Chris Woods. He's going to be extremely dangerous. But those two, will have to be sort of focused. But I almost think actually you do wonder if playing someone who's, going to offer us a threat, Arteta will be on them saying, look, this team, they're above us for a start. So we've got to, make sure that we are, absolutely at it, and that could help sharpen the mind. If we were playing a team who are really struggling for form, you might question the approach to the game, and so bring it on. I'm just looking forward to being back to the stadium. I feel like I haven't been to the Emirates for ages.
Yes,
all these away games, ridiculous.
It feels like forever, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And 3:00. What's that all about? Saturday, 3:00 kickoff.
No,
what are they thinking?
What will happen?
Any other news? Any other thoughts before we wrap?
As we are sort of recording, Arsenal women were playing Juventus in the Women's Champions League. Now, they were already 4-0 up from the first leg. They've really hit the ground running under this. Is it Sleggers?
Sleggers, yeah. I thought it was Seegers, but it's Sleggers, yeah.
And so, they're scoring more goals. They look like they're at it again. I believe just looking on here, they won 1-0, so 5-0 aggregate victory. They're into the quarters, good luck to them.
Yeah, doing rather well. It may be that she gets the job full time. Who knows?
Why not? Yeah, absolutely.
There's also been talk of expanding the Emirates again. It's sort of it came up a few months ago and it's come back again. And, well, there's all sorts of murmurings around it. And obviously, even if it got permission, it's hard looking at the stadium to imagine how they would restructure it in order to fit an extra 20,000 seats in there. But I just thought it's worth mentioning because it's kind of one of those things.
But it's one of those things, isn't it? You know, it's like silly season in August when all the politicians are not sitting in Parliament and these random stories come out. Every time there's an international break, you know, stuff about stadium expansion comes up. Look, the thing that will ultimately kibosh it is the stadium can't go up because the planning said that it could only go to a certain height, and also any possible expansion will require heavy investment from Arsenal to improve the transport links, because TfL, Transport for London, said that they're not going to do anything, but they won't accept, you know, the higher levels of capacity that would come with a stadium expansion. So I think that ultimately kiboshes the lot a little bit. You know, there was lots of funny talk about perhaps going down into the ground slightly and going that way, or even said, I mean, they are quite wide seats at the Emirates. So if you narrowed those, you could maybe squeeze a few hundred here and there.
It's like on an aeroplane. If you look at different aeroplanes where the seats are actually on tracks, I didn't realise this until recently, but when you're in an economy, if they wanted to make it kind of economy plus, they can actually move the seats forward a little bit.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I mean, I don't really
which is why sometimes the windows on an aeroplane don't align with where you're sitting.
I remember a silly season story where there was, I don't know if it was an April Fool, actually, it might have been, where Ryanair planned to have leaning boards,
standing,
so people stood rather than sat, so they could fit more people in. I mean, if that's an April Fool, that's a good one, because it's so believable. I love it.
Yeah. But it is. I look at our stadium and I think it's only, you know, it's barely 20 years old, and it is kind of outdated in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So it does need modernising, but. Yeah. I think the idea of an extra 20,000 seats, unless they sort of hover them above the kind of, you know, one of those things that's sort of strung into the centre across the top of the roof, and people are sort of suspended looking downwards. But no. Okay.
Can you name your 13 players? Nottingham Forest and Arsenal in the Premier League era.
Okay.
Yeah, this. I mean, some of them you just absolutely wouldn't get.
Oh, Kevin Campbell.
Yes. I'd see that was the most sort of romantic one and nostalgic one, you know, sadly died this year. But yeah, loved by Forest fans, Everton fans and Arsenal fans sort of equally. Yeah. So Kevin Campbell is up there as well. So just go through the list. It's in alphabetical order, so which is really boring, but there you go. So Chuba Akpom had a spell there. Nicholas Bentner had a spell at Forest, I know, which I've forgotten completely about. Carl Jenkinson was there after his Arsenal career. Henry Lansbury, Holly's mate, who's had a long spell at Forest, actually, mainly in the Championship, but yeah. Arsenal youth player, Jordi Osei Tutu.
Yes.
Nope. Oh, yeah? Okay. Well, I was going to say me neither, but...
No, I'd heard of him, but I didn't know he played for Forest.
David Platt played there for a season.
Good God.
Aaron Ramsey had 5 games at Forest, which weirdly was... He'd signed for Arsenal and then went out on loan to Forest quite early on, by the looks of this. 2010 he played for Forest, which I find a bit strange. Nuno Tavares, who had that famous game against Forest where he was... hooked off after like 20 minutes, wasn't he, in the all-white kit. Armand Traore was another one. Matt Turner, goalkeeper, who is obviously still there, as far as I know. Not playing, because, you know, he's not great, but okay, there you go. Sorry, Matt. Matt Upson had a spell there in 2000, and Ian Wright had 10 games for Forest.
Righty, of course he did.
Did the rounds, didn't he, after...
God, on crutches, probably.
In a wheelchair.
Oh, well, thanks, Steph. It's nothing quite like a quiz to round things off.
Lovely, jubbly.
Mate, I'm going to leave it there, and you and I will hook up at the game for a quick sing-song at Block 5, if I can make it on time.
If you can make it, there should be no excuses.
I've got kids stuff to do. That's trouble. Okay, well, we'll reconvene for a chat after the Forest game, hopefully talking about a blistering 4-1 win and not a 1-1 draw or a nail-biting 2-1er. Thanks for joining us, Steph, as ever.
Cheers, mate.
Catch you for the next one.
See ya.
The North Bank, an Arsenal podcast. Subscribe, rate and review on your app, and find us on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok at North Bank Pod. Email hello@thenorthbankafc.com and check out our website, thenorthbankafc.com. Produced by The Podcast Company.